welcome to the Beyond Bones podcast. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, playing host duty for Craig, who is out at the moment. Are you happy that I'm hosting for Craig, stepping in?
Actually, I love working with Craig, and I haven't gotten to work with him very much. So, I mean, how bad can it be?
Well, like I mentioned off camera, see, I can take my glasses off. I've got my head shaved. I got my beard. I got a tat just today.
We hardly know that you're anyone different. You almost look the same.
I'm almost 61. If I wasn't wearing my glasses, I'd probably be blind. I wouldn't know the difference.
There would just be three identical people here.
Oh boy.
Anyways, bear with me as I'm getting over a little respiratory thing. Those of you who know me know I've got a 1-year-old named Riker. Yes, after Star Trek. That's just how I roll. And any parents out there, I know, David, are you a parent?
Yes, and now I'm a grandparent.
It's just constantly getting sick. It's just constantly kids and grandkids getting you sick, and that's what I'm dealing with right now. But
and trying to figure out what he's going to call me.
Your grandkid?
Papa.
Yeah.
Now I'm going for Grumpy.
Papa Paleo or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Papasaurus.
Are you going to take him to see the trains, Dave?
Yeah, you bet.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you create memories. And I'm convinced that's why these things are still so popular. It's an echo from the 1920s. So it's everybody's granddad, their dad takes them, their granddad takes them, and it's played forward to where electric trains are a Christmas memory.
Absolutely. And before we get into that, because obviously that's what this podcast is about today, I just want to ask my co-host, Kat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good. Awesome. And glad to have Dave back and glad to have you hosting with me. It's kind of fun little shakeup.
That's right. So I think maybe we'll start here. Kat, do you have any childhood train memories?
I actually do. My dad had the old fashioned, and I'm probably going to say the name wrong, Lionel trains.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
They were big pieces and smoke would come out of it. And they were from the 1920s or something. Yeah. We had a big plywood board that the track was glued to, and it was noisy and it would go around and around and around. So that's my train memory.
Was it only around Christmas time, or did he have it out kind of year round?
It was periodically came out. It wasn't really a Christmas thing for us per se. It probably would have lit the Christmas tree on fire. It was still Danger Toy Train. Yeah. But it was out periodically, and it's a good memory. Yeah. I like model trains.
So, David, can you tell us, speaking about scale and size, can you tell us about the trains we have on display at HMNS?
Sure. Yeah. What we have downstairs is an HO scale, and it's probably the largest HO scale in Texas. And what that means in practical terms is that it's 1/48. So if you're a model maker, and I do enjoy building models and things like that, that means that every inch on your model is equal to 4 feet or 48 inches in reality. Wow. And most people love the HO scales because one of the things about you can't just have the train, you got to have the village, you got to have historic places, you got to have the landscapes, and that's a popular size because that's about the smallest you can make it and still have things look kind of realistic.
How long is speaking of models, because we like to model ours after, you'll find little Easter eggs from around.
Yeah, all over
here. Yeah, when did we add the Be Someone? When was that added?
When we had the Be Someone was there from day one. Oh, because cool. That's part of that's really iconic for Houston. And unfortunately, I come under that bridge every day, and unfortunately, they've changed it now. Mm-hmm. It says COVID 1984. But somebody will sneak back up there in the middle of the night, hopefully in the next month or two, and put Be Someone back on there. But that's always been there as part of the Houston landscape.
I saw someone on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this on the HMNS Twitter. I forget the person's name right now, and I don't want to out him if this is him. But he said, looks like someone marked your bridge with Be Someone, wink. And I was like, is this the guy?
Yeah. Well, that's become an iconic Houston thing. And I love it because it's positive. And
for those who don't know, can you explain what exactly that is? Because, I know what it is, but I didn't until, our train deal, and I went, what is that? And then I had to find out. There's probably some listeners that don't have any idea.
Yeah, it's an iconic piece of graffiti that you see either when you're coming in, when you're going out of town from downtown. There's a railroad trestle that skirts right on this central business district, and it's been graffitied on that particular trestle.
Okay, that makes sense. And it's on a train trestle. That's kind of
Right.
nicely layered.
But do we know? Here's the question, and because I don't know it off the top of my head, this is one thing that Craig, I know for sure, would probably know what the story behind the Be Someone, the actual graffiti, not just what we have modeled, but
Right.
the story behind the actual graffiti.
I don't know. I've wondered that. And what amazes me is that people do come in and some other group will graffiti over it. And then the other group comes by and graffitis over their graffiti and puts it back.
I'm going to try.
So it's been something that's pretty consistent and off.
I'm going to try to put in this podcast description a brief story behind that. If I can dig up any kind of background on the actual like history of that Be Someone graffiti.
Yeah, I'd like to know that.
Yeah,
but it was considered iconic to the Houston skyline, and so it was there from day one.
So I'll check that out and I'll put it in the podcast description. So no matter how you're consuming this podcast, viewers, check the description and we'll see if we can put in a little blurb about the history of the Be Someone graffiti. David, are there any other notable Houston icons?
They have I want to say it's the Pennzoil building that's in there, but it's not the Pennzoil building. They have the Houston rail yards. They have a lot of little things from Houston. The skyline, they've modeled a lot of the skyline, and they've done that for many of the major cities in Texas. So the Houston, and of course they did the ship channel, and then of course they did Galveston because that used to be one of the main rail centers, and they have the nearest railroad museum to us. So they also tried to feature places that have rail museums.
Oh, that's cool.
And so there's a representation of some of those rail museums there. And I just recently visited the one in Galveston, so I'll throw them a plug. It's well worth the trip. And it's in the model. It's there. And also, last year we had kayakers in the ship channel, but there must have been some horrible disaster because the kayakers, or they smartened up. So the little 1/48 scale kayakers aren't in the ship channel this year.
They're just gone?
They're gone. So is the Bigfoot. But there's been a lot of other little Easter eggs that have been added. I've personally complained to the guys that install it. They say they're looking for the Bigfoot.
Oh my god!
Finding the Bigfoot every year was a thing with me.
That's pretty funny.
They're in the piney woods, the East Texas piney woods, which of course, in theory, if you believe in cryptozoology, there's actual Bigfoots out there. So it was sort of a funny little joke.
So I have a question. Is the way I understood it too, that some of the actual geology that's represented in the scene is correct, right?
Yes. We tried to model it and I consulted on that part. We tried to model it as closely as we could, but of course Texas is such a vast state and you can't put everything in there. So you're going to have some things bumping against other things that in reality aren't there. So a lot of my geologist friends say, you put this next to that and it's not near there. Yeah, you're right. There's 400 miles between there, but I can't model that.
Right.
So
there's limitations of models, David Temple.
There are, and that's one of them. And that's what I had to explain to them. It's not meant to be a perfect model. It's meant to be an homage.
And as scientists, they know that.
Yes. They may just be giving me grief. But as an homage, the sort of high points are there. Of the sort of all the major Texas physiographic provinces are represented. So we have something from all the provinces, even though in reality they're not next to each other.
So that's a good segue. This question's bouncing around in my brain. Does the actual layout of the track change from year to year? Do they kind of make little changes, or is
they do make little changes? And this year, of course, we're building a monster and a very beautiful chemistry hall that is going to probably in size and scope will even rival our energy hall. And so the spot where the train set used to live has shrunk a little bit. So they had to cut one part of one diorama, which was the Pecos River Bridge, which is for rail history in Texas is a big deal, and as engineering achievement in Texas, it's a big deal, or anywhere in the world, really. But they had to cut that. So looking forward to maybe next year, and it will be back next year, they will probably see ways of adding that back in. So, but they do add little twerks everywhere, little tweaks here and there. Guess not twerks. But anyway, little
someone
tweaks here and there.
twerking on the track.
Yes,
No
you got somebody twerking on the rail set there in 1/48 scale, so they're just about an inch tall. You
Yeah.
have to look closely. But they they added some things. One thing they added, which is hidden in there, which is kind of cool, is because we have the Ramses exhibit here, they've added a tiny little mummy sarcophagus with the mummy, and the mummy case is kind of opening where it looks like the mummy might be coming out.
Cool, like in a fish tank, the chest in a fish tank.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
like the
kind of.
treasure chest.
That'll be next year. They'll have to automate that. That's one of the things that people love about rail sets is creating little movements and things, that go with it. And miniatures in general as well. Miniatures in museums have a long history. And with a train set, all you're doing is you're taking your miniatures and you just add a train to it or build it around the train set. So it's pretty exciting.
Do you know roughly off the top of your head how many feet of track, give or take, is laid out?
No, I know the overall size of the layout is the size of a tennis court, roughly, in square footage. But since they've taken out the Pecos River Bridge, the Pecos River Bridge was always mounted way overhead because it was so large, and of course it's a huge bridge, so people would see it going over their head, which I always thought that was kind of is an immersive environment idea. You got things going on underneath you because they have a secret little train set that's inside the thing that I told somebody today. I used to crawl under there and look at it, and I don't do it anymore because I'm too old and I'm afraid I'll get stuck and I'll have to ask for help to get out of there. And I just don't want to do that. But the little kids run under there and they can see a certain train set, the fantasy kind of train set that's made just for them.
Cool.
So I was going to ask you if that made the cut, and there's like a Thomas the Tank deal in there,
that's
right?
the one that's down there. Yeah.
Okay, it's Thomas.
Yeah, I think that made the cut. That's in there.
Excellent,
But
excellent.
the only thing we really lost was the Pecos.
Yeah.
How many engines do we got running around? Is it just one continuous train, or are there
Oh no. They've
going?
got, and of course they've got them timed out carefully so we don't have the Casey Jones kind of rail accident where two trains meet each other.
Yeah.
But we could sell tickets to that probably.
Yeah.
It's a good Grateful Dead homage there for Craig.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. And so, no, there's probably half a dozen that run. And some of them are actually on timers. This thing is very intricately done with computers where they'll time out. So because they don't want the brushes on the engines to wear out. They don't want them to overheat. So they'll just stop. And, of course, then many of them have that sound built in that you hear when you hear a train stop where it's like, they're waiting to take off again. And then, they're on an automatic sort of program, and they'll take off in a little bit.
Getting a little geeky and granular here because
oh my gosh, it's unbelievably geeky. And one of the greatest joys in my life is I got handed the paddle. So they have this master paddle that controls them all, and you can take it on manual mode, so you can make them do different things.
Cool.
And every now and then they'll do that.
So speaking of geeky and granular, can you name off the top of your head any of the engines represented, like General Electric or? That's the only ones I know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know those engines are on there, but I can't. The one we did have was the actual original train. There's two. They only built 4 of these trains. It's one of the largest locomotive engines that's ever been built. 3 of them are on display. 2 of them are static, and one of them actually runs. And it came through Houston about 1.5 years ago. And they have one of those that's on static display. But you know what? That may not be in there this year. But they have a lot of the sort of railway servicing and railway mechanical yards that are with trains stuck, in the different bays and things.
I can't get past the fact that toy trains wear out. Like, that never occurred to me, and I'm just sort of stuck on that, just rattling in my head. I was like, they have to rest because they'll wear out.
But that's part of the fun, and I'm sure David could attest to this. Part of the fun of being a geek about this kind of stuff is like, yay, a motor wore out. I get to replace a motor. I get to tinker with the train.
For people that do model railroading, a lot of them do their own, service. They do their own, they'll take motors out, they put motors in, you modify this motor, you do everything. You're sort of like a mechanic, and you're doing everything, but it's this big. So rather than it being
I kind of equate
building
it to
a big Chevy or something.
right. Exactly my point. I kind of equate it to classic cars. I myself have a classic car. There's classic car owners, and then there's people that don't understand it. In that, like, why would you get a classic car? It's going to break down. It doesn't run. Why would you want something that doesn't run? What a pain in the butt, blah, blah. It's like, that's why we like classic cars, because we can get our hands dirty and we can keep it running and you know, make something work that doesn't work. So training modelers the same way.
Yeah. So is yours an actual functioning car or an object de art?
So for people who don't know, I have a 1983 DeLorean DMC-12. It's the car.
Oh my God, I love that car.
Yeah,
It's a classic now. So that means I'm a classic.
It's been classic for over a decade.
I had a 64 Thunderbird that for the most part, it was an object de art in that it sat on static display in the front yard until the neighbors would complain or until I came into some money, and then it would run for a while.
Right.
But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
My car, it runs. I drive it, you know, a few times a month, and I actually rent it out from time to time when I thoroughly vet people through my I have classic car insurance, Haggerty. This is not a spot for them at all, but they have a service kind of like Turo, where you rent like people's actual cars. And actual Turo, I haven't responded to them yet, not to get too sidetracked off track, but Turo came to me and said, hey, can we we want to talk to you, want to call you and ask you how it's gone with renting out your car, because Turo is apparently thinking, hope this is not NDA or something, thinking about like getting into the classic realm. But it's cool. So classic cars, trains. I wish I could spin my camera around the studio here. I have a video up on our HMNS YouTube channel about me adding I've got it right here, a solar panel to a Game Boy. So I
remember.
Yeah, put the solar panel. It's all about tinkering. That's why I was super excited to talk about trains today, because that's the one thing I've been talking to my wife. I kind of broached the idea like, what if we get, you know, trains or something, because my uncle was into trains, and that'd be a whole nother. She's like, do you mean you want to have, you know, like 80 feet of track running around the living room, like up around the
ceiling? That would be kind of cool, actually.
Like, yes, that's actually what I want. But
you could say it's for the boy, your child.
That's precisely the excuse there is, well, it's for my baby boy. It's not for dad.
That's really what's keeping the model railroad hobby going, is it's all, everybody, myself included, wanting to do it, but it's for the grandchild or for the child.
It's such a wonderful excuse.
Yeah. And it may have started out like that originally now, but that's one complaint about the hobby. And the people that practice this, they consider it's called the king of all hobbies. At least that's how they'll describe it. But it's gotten to be very expensive. But as the people on the blogs and the people that do this defend it, it's the quality has gone way up. At every point, the realism, the detail, everything has gone way up. So, and actually, the model train companies realized at some point, maybe in the 80s or early 90s, that if you build a high-end product, the people that love model trains will pay it because they want them.
Well, even things for dollhouses. I had a dollhouse. I mean, the furniture, the scale stuff was all super expensive, even back in the 70s. You know, I think, you know, there's quality miniature stuff, you know, is expensive. It's hard to build.
Yeah. David, do you know if there's a lot of gatekeeping in the hobby, toxic gatekeeping within the train?
I don't know what is that?
So,
I'm about to learn a new phrase.
Yeah,
I don't imagine people with blowguns.
No, yeah, I don't imagine that it's a problem with train in the train hobbyist community. I'd imagine they're pretty welcoming. So gatekeeping. So let's say like if somebody wanted to get into I don't know, off the top of my head, anime, watching like Japanese.
Oh yeah.
Anime. I really enjoyed this cartoon or whatever, and then you'd have like the people who are hardcore into it, like that's stupid. You need to watch this, and that, but you can't watch it yet until you watch this.
Yeah.
That's the gatekeeping. So for like model trains, I was just asking if there's any gatekeeping model trains, like someone, basically a noob going into a forum saying, where do I start with model trains? Would their first response be something negative, something if you don't know?
No, I don't think so. In fact, if you're interested in that, not only can you come down and look at ours, I used to be the volunteer director here, and one of the things that I believed in firmly and still do is that, so there's all sorts of organizations around town that they're specialized, and they have in their mandates public education, but they never really have an opportunity to do it. So like say the Gulf Coast Reptile Association, all these people, maybe they can go to a fair or something and set up a booth and talk to people, but generally they don't have a home at all. They're very itinerant. But fortunately, some of the Houston model railroading clubs have really glommed onto this exhibit, and they're down there, and there were some down there just a few minutes ago, and they are more than happy to talk to anybody about model railroading. They're very, very, very passionate, and so it would be very easy to get a great appreciation if you wanted to get started or you wanted to do something or you had some questions about something. They would be very welcoming and very helpful.
That was going to be my next question. Did you consult with a lot of the model train community in Houston? Did they play a big role in this?
Oh, yeah, they do. In the interpretation, they do. In fact, I'm the in-house curator for this exhibit. But what I learned early on in doing the interpretation and doing this stuff is basically stay out of their way.
Right.
That's the biggest thing you can do for them, because
let them do their thing.
Let them do their thing, because they know way more than the average person. And of course, they have that passion. They have an unbelievable love of this stuff that it really translates when they talk to the public. So we're glad to have them down there.
And you can see the same type of thing. This is kind of one of the last things I'll mention is that at the George Observatory, a lot of those astronomers are amateur astronomers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not knowledgeable. They're the most knowledgeable people in the entire region of the country.
Yep.
And there's absolutely, one thing about astronomy definitely is there is absolutely no gatekeeping that I've ever experienced. It is.
They want to share. They want to share.
Exactly. And so it's really awesome to hear that the model train community.
And when they let me have my pony exhibit, which I've been working on for years, I want everybody to stay out of my way and let me curate, the pony collection how I like.
Well, that might be gatekeeping. Then.
The astronomy
that is gatekeeping
a little bit.
Is very interesting, because they also, like, I bought a small telescope and I was learning how to use it, and so I took it out to the George, and they were very welcoming, very helpful, and they want other people. Of course, you may know this. One of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. And I know, certainly I know Kat knows that. And so they would teach me, set me up on an object. And then I would first, because, astronomy can be kind of gear intensive. So I was very intimidated because I had, a lower end scope. But they really were very grateful to have that, because that's where people start. And so having somebody come out and, if you have this scope, this is what you'll see. And then, of course, you can look it out through all the other ones. But I imagine trains are sort of like that. So I got into model railroading a little bit, but it's hardly worth saying. But I don't have the room to have an HO scale. So they're different scales.
Right.
And so the train that I have, and I have it right here, this is called an N scale.
Cool.
So an N scale, this is the Clinton DeWitt. This is probably the first passenger train, steam train ever made from the 1830s. It's a model of that famous engine, and the train cars are actually just stagecoach cars. So they put stagecoaches on wheels and use that. But this is N scale, so you could set this up on a 3 or 4 foot board, and you could have your train set going around. But one of the things that's a disadvantage to this, if you want to build a huge layout and a set with it, it doesn't work that well, because a person, like I did the math on me, I would be less than a 1/4 inch tall.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So people would be really, really tiny. Whereas an HO scale, I would be 1 1/4 inches. So you can, at 1 1/4 inches, you can say, oh, it's a person and he's holding something or he's doing something.
Oh, that's
but at less than a 1/4 inch, you really can't tell. So, but on the other hand, it's fun to have, and it does run, and it's you can set it up and take it down very easily, as opposed to having to have a huge space commitment.
Absolutely. And that's a really good piece of advice. Anybody who's curious about getting into a hobby, whether it's trains or astronomy or whatever it is, the gear intimidation is a very real thing. And you'll in some of the toxic gatekeeping, and keep going back to that, would be like, oh, if you don't have a $4,000, Schmidt Cassegrain 18-inch telescope, then you can't see anything. Not in Houston, That's not the case at all. You can do a whole lot with a lot less, and that is the best way to learn. I kind of equate it to a bad singer getting a really good microphone, thinking that's going to make them sound better, but a really good microphone just makes them
sound worse.
How bad they really are. So somebody who wants to get into model trains to keep this on the tracks, get it.
So to speak.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to dive in headfirst to an HO model scale for size constraints, for financial constraints, whatever it is. You can start out at a smaller, what's yours, N scale?
N scale.
Yeah, N scale, which is probably a better entry point. And you'll still get a very similar amount of satisfaction. Like the rate of return, I guess, when you get an HO scale train, you're getting 99% of the model train enjoyment, I would imagine. And that if you want to spend the extra money on that 1% to go up to a bigger scale and do that whole investment, because there's one thing about taking up 4 or 5 feet, there's another thing about taking up 40 or 50 feet and the added cost there. So if you are even thinking about trains,
come see ours.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome, Kat. Come see ours.
Yeah, you can get a lot of enjoyment out of that set. And I do. I look forward to it every year. So it's and it is now a fixture in Houston. So it'll be back.
And I feel like they take it down and then the next month they put it back up. Now I know that's not true, and I'm just getting old, and it seems that way. But man, you know what I mean?
Months, yeah.
Yeah.
So David, how long do people have to come see the trains at the museum this season?
Through early January. So it'll come down, I think, probably on the 4th or maybe the 1st or 2nd week of January.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So you got to get on down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other train lore and stuff that's pretty exciting. Yeah. So one thing is, you look at the Houston City Seal, it has a train on it.
Yeah.
And it's what's called the 440, which it looks like it when I first saw the Houston City Seal, like, oh, it's an old-timey train. Well, when the Houston City Seal was made, that was the most modern engine that was there. And the Allen brothers, who founded Houston, actually made sure it was on there because they really wanted to attract the railroad to Houston. They knew that it would be important. That was initially, from the very beginning of Houston, trains were very important, and they saw that as being the lifeline of the city. And Houston didn't get a train until 1856. But when they made the seal in 1840, they were kind of looking forward, knowing that railroads would play a huge role. Mm-hmm. And they do. Houston is an urban district. Houston has more rail lines than I think any city in the United States. And a weird thing about it is, and I'm sure this was never happened to you, Kat, where you have to take the defensive driving class.
Never.
You ever take that? Okay, yes. Yeah. So they have different sections that you have to take. And in every other state in the union, in almost every other locality, if you get 7 of the 8 modules, that's good. You can do it. And the last module is train automobile safety. And in Houston, Texas, it's not an option. If you end up having to stay an extra hour, you have to do it, because we're number 1 in train car accidents.
Of course we are.
Wow.
We're number 1. We're number 1.
Hooray.
So there's still lots and lots of railroads around Houston. It's very important. And ironically, the first railroad that came to Texas, it was about 1850, or came to Houston, was in 1856. And that was the first year that they know that somebody made a model train.
Wow.
A toy model train. So those things are kind of
intertwined.
About the same time, yeah.
Interesting. It seems to me that 1856 Houston would be pretty far south and west for 1856 for a rail line, because as I understand it, rails in westward expansion, that really didn't kind of pick up until after the Civil War. I could be wrong on that, but after the Civil War,
you're not thinking of something because it's not there anymore.
Right.
So at that time, the biggest port, the biggest exporting place in Texas was Galveston.
Right.
And Galveston, since the 1900 hurricane, has shrunk in economic importance, and Houston has grown. But Houston was really kind of a backwater up until that.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. For Houston to get a railroad in 1856 seemed to be very important, because we were not the port at that time.
Oh, you're right.
So Houston, municipality, whatever, getting a railroad was really neat that the Allen brothers put that on the seal in 1840.
Yeah,
hoping like, hey, let's attract the railroad down here because we're not a port city yet. We're just Houston right now. So the fact that they got it 16 years later in 1856, that's really impressive.
Yeah, the point was that, of course, Houston grew sugar, course, it was slave economy, so grew sugar, lots of sugar, grew lots of cotton, grew lots of agricultural products, and you have to get those products to market. So they would come into Houston and then by rail be transferred to Galveston and then by boat be shipped out. So that's how it all worked. And
fascinating.
And of course, there's a Texas joke that's actually very, very funny, and Kat may know the answer to this because I've known her so many years. I may have told her. It's clean, so I'll just go ahead and spell it out. Tell you what it is. What's the longest train ride ever?
One where it's next to you?
No, a lot of people. That's probably true, but a lot of people would guess like the Orient Express. They used to have, I think it was called the Golden Express, that went from Chicago to New Orleans to San Francisco, which was probably the longest one in the United States. Then there's the Trans-Siberia Railroad, and there's all those. And those are all, probably legitimate choices. But it's actually from Winnie, Texas to Galveston, which is only about 80 or 90 miles. And the reason they say that is they had a train that was leaving on September 8th, 1900, pulling out of High Island, headed for Galveston. And of course, that's the day the hurricane hit. Mm-hmm. So the hurricane swept the train off the tracks. It strewed the train cars across the Texas, coastal prairie, and it buried the engine under a huge mound of sand. Wow. And so it took them basically 3 years, 16 days, and 12 minutes to get it excavated back on the tracks and make that trip. And many of the passengers who took that trip, who went back to Galveston that day, had their original tickets from 1900. So in essence, to go 90 miles, it took them several years.
That's crazy.
So that's what the joke is.
So that's how many of us are on Jeopardy or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
That's right.
It's from Winnie to Galveston.
Well, the other Texas joke with that is there was a man who would go over to Galveston, businessman go over to Galveston every morning. He would take that train, and he would the people knew he was going to show up at a certain time, and they were going to have 2 eggs, some bacon. They're supposed to have his breakfast ready and waiting for him on the table when he got there. And of course, when he came back 3 years later, it wasn't waiting on him, and he was irate, and he created a scene wanting to know why his breakfast wasn't waiting on him. But
it's pretty funny. That's a true story.
Yeah, it's a true story.
That's one of those stories that's so wacky that why wouldn't it be true?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's kind of a Texas thing, but
So David, is there any other train trivia or facts you can give us before we start coming to the end of the rail here?
There's probably a lot. If you want to know, one of the things that, of course, all this goes back to miniatures, and why. And one of the enduring things is, why is this so popular? Why is it so popular? And part of it has to do with the human psyche and the human eye, and we really are drawn to small, cute things. We love it. And it's like
babies.
It's a baby, exactly. Magical miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's always been popular, and toys have always been popular. And one of the things I think about is like one of the things I brought with me. I can't fire it up because I'll get thrown out of the building because we're not allowed to have live flames. But this is not a train, but it is a steam engine. So it's a toy model steam engine. It's a tractor. And incidentally, if you go to the Galveston Museum, they have the actual one of these, a full-scale one that's there. So that's really one of the best ways to learn about something. With a model, you can see how everything works, and you can put it together. And the initial toy steam engines weren't trains. They were, and I think Kat actually had one of these. I think she showed it to me years ago.
I was about to mention it.
The big industrial kinds of things that they would put in.
Uh-oh. It was a big steam engine like GE would have had or whatever.
Yeah. So like the toys that we have in our anthropology hall, toys play a very specific cultural role. Like they're supposed to teach you things. So if you look at the toy kayak, it's a perfect scale model. You have to tie all the knots right. You have to do everything. And you make your own tiny kayak, knowing that when you become a man, you're going to have to make a full-size one. Mm-hmm. And, of course, with women, they had different kinds of things they would play, mostly associated with child rearing. So you'd have dolls and things that you would teach you how to do that. So when the toy steam engines came along, the early ones were basically teaching you how to be like an Andrew Carnegie, how to be an industrialist. And, you can play with these sorts of things that were.
Because they were expensive too. They're expensive toys. It was a couple $100. It was my dad's. He was, big into that kind of stuff. But I still have that. I'm going to have to bring it back here.
I'll mention real quick as we wrap up here, the Train Museum in Galveston. That's where I took my wife when we were dating on our first date. And we wound up getting married. So if you have a special interest in your life, go on a first date or second date to the Train Museum, or to the HMNS.
To the HMNS, bring your date to see the train.
Come to HMNS first and be like, you want to see the full size, and then you just go down, an hour to Galveston and finish up.
You can make a day of it.
Yeah.
I'll close with one last sort of train trivia fact, which most people won't know, and that is that railroads are responsible for probably the birth of country music. And so there was a very famous rail accident in 1903, which it was a gentleman by the name of Vernon Dalhart recorded it as a song in 1924. And it was the first million-seller record in the United States. Really? And because of that, it was also the first musical lawsuit because everybody was suing, for their things. But it was the story about a train. The title of it is The Wreck of Old 97. So the train had to deliver the mail, and if they were minutes late, they had to pay huge penalties to the federal government. Wow. So there was a vested interest in being on time. And of course, this gentleman was way behind time. And like the lyrics to the song say, this is not 38, but it's old 97. And you got to put it into Spencer on time. So the passenger liner, if they were a little bit late, it'd be okay. But with the mail train, you couldn't be late. And so he was speeding too fast. And he basically ran off a trestle.
Well, that is interesting.
So
I'm trying to think of a train pun like you guys have been doing, but I can't seem to come up with one.
So the podcast is pulling into the station now. So speaking of being on
there you go. Well, it's been great. I really enjoyed this.
One more time, David, how long do people have to come see the trains?
Goes away January 2nd.
Wonderful. So we got some time. You got a month or so to come out there. And take pictures and tag HMNS.
Yes, absolutely.